So my name's Manish. I'm a paediatrician in West Auckland. So disclaimer, I'm one of those slow-thinking hospital-based clinicians you may or may not have heard about in the last few days. I tend to be naturally quite suspicious of new things, but nonetheless curious to find ways to improve the work we do. I noticed there's a lot of people in the private sector at this kind of conference, so I just wanted to set the scene. This is the kind of building I work in. Some people recognise it here. This is the old Snelga building at Waitakere Hospital in West Auckland. So to many of my doctor and non-doctor friends, there's quite a challenge in the work I do. I work with these guys, children, but as you probably know, they're not always so bright-eyed and interested in what you have to say. In fact, they can often be quite shy, quite silent, and quite scared. You can go in for a high five and they can just kind of completely leave you hanging. You can open up with a question like, oh, you know, how's school? And they can reply with a very flat, monotone, suspicious kind of good. You know, that's the kind of interaction. This tension is a humongous barrier to our communication and understanding of a child. And if we can't understand a child, we'll continue to struggle to help them. All of this is magnified massively in cases of child abuse, which is a lot of the work I do. So what tools we currently have? Despite this being quite a big problem, we have really limited tools in this area. There's a playmat sort of suitable for babies and toddlers. We've got a thing of toys in the corner. Most of those are things like wooden blocks, toys they're not really familiar with or interested. And we've got a bed which a lot of children think that's where we do surgery. So overall quite scary, a bit intimidating, not really their cup of tea. So this was a photo taken of the clinical space I work in West Auckland, but you could probably replace that location and date to any paediatric service, anywhere in the world probably for the last 40 years. So what do we do? Well, we usually get the caregiver and the child sort of endures this awkward, boring conversation, often directly about them. Then we usually turn to the child and realise we've lost their kind of attention, their focus, and their trust. So I'm in clinic one day and a social worker comes up to me, and as a social worker I really value her and known for a long time, and she says, "You're seeing TJ today." And then I can see the heart sink on her face come over. He's had a lot of assessments, counsellors, schools, other social workers, police, and she kind of softens me up for a big kind of blow. Don't worry, he's not going to talk to you. It's taken about 6 months for me to get any words out of him. He's just going to snigger to his mother and make some kind of jokes to himself. Don't worry about that. So TJ came really as advertised. Came in, hoodie on, didn't really make any eye contact, made a few mumbles to his mum. So what are we going to do? I mean, this child has had the usual assessments. This is not a unique or surprising kind of situation in the work I do. He's had a lot of assessments by well-meaning, polite professionals, I'm sure. But what are we going to do to improve this situation? How are we going to make a change here? Well, we started drawing. And in fact, I've been drawing with kids like TJ for a number of years now. First of all, he drew himself and he didn't put any facial expression on it. We then drew some other people around him and we thought they were quite important, so we put a circle around them. He then told me about his dog Benji. Benji only has 3 legs following a car accident. And I asked TJ, well, how does Benji get on with that? And he says, oh, he's pretty good about it. He just sort of gets on with things. So while I was learning about Benji, I was also learning about TJ's kind of ideas and experience with adversity and resilience. We drew some more people, other pets that Benji knew and his frenemies. And what I was learning more about was how TJ values relationships and his fierce loyalty. We drew some other people who TJ thought they were important, but they're not in the circle. So it's quite an important thing to know. And then we drew a whole bunch of people, and then we drew some faces on them. Smiley faces if they were kind of nice people, and sort of angry faces if we weren't sure. They were a bit scary sometimes. And by the end, we'd filled up quite a bit of the paper. And sort of we reflected and said, there's actually quite a lot of nice people looking after you, looking out for you. And TJ kind of lifted. He was quite proud of that. But not all the kids I see can draw like TJ. To be able to draw, you have to do several things. You've got to hold a pen, concentrate, and plan, and pretty much bank on getting it right first time. You can see this is something my son is not too worried about, but for many of the kids I see in clinic, if there's something that's too hard or they could get it wrong or it feels a bit weird, they'll just give up and they'll shut down. And that's actually a huge disaster for a person like me. So we made an app. I'll just get the video going. So the app is great because it allows me and the child to explore, play and interact in a less confrontational way. I can take the child and the child can lead the kind of activity there. We can talk about different things. They can draw several items of interest. We often start with the house and put people in there. While they're talking about that, we often end up talking about their school, their home, their relationships, etc. They can make things bigger and smaller pretty easily, and we can all get on and start doing this kind of stuff while avoiding that icky face-to-face, eye-to-eye interaction. For most of the children I see, this interaction, which we've been taught and relied on, just doesn't really work for them. So why draw on an app? Just to expand. So the app has many advantages over pen and paper. They can make mistakes more easily. You don't need to plan as well. If you wanted to put an orange circle, you could put a circle then change it orange, or you could make something orange and make it into a circle. Hard to do with pen and paper to undo those kind of things. They can move things around, and often that happens continuously. We're just moving things around. They don't actually need to be able to draw something to show something. They can just drag and plop it in. That's really handy. And they can manipulate objects easy, such as size. We can manipulate the emotional expression just by putting a finger on the face and it will cycle through, which is great too. We use these giant big iPads, the 12.9-inch iPad Pros, which for a lot of these kids is actually just a really cool special feeling. It's quite a good hook for them as well. So we've been using these big iPads, and size does really matter in this kind of environment. A lot of these kids have visuospatial and planning problems. They're the kids in school who are always squeezing their name in. You may notice many doctors do that with clinical notes right to the end and don't leave a page for the next nurse. They just make their plans fit in. But this is really great. We can pan across. We never kind of run out of room. And that frees the child up quite a bit, which is great. It's also great working with these massive devices because working with kids is really great, because if your technology isn't really up to the mark or there's something better in their mum's or auntie's purse, they'll let you know pretty quickly. And so when all of these kids have seen a tablet, but none of them have really seen one this big, which is great. So we've been using the app for about a year, which I've sort of designed and IBM have created. I often draw with the children and we do things together. It's great in that way because often they can take the lead, then I can take the lead, and it's kind of a bit more natural to what they're used to. It's a kind of play-based where there's no kind of mistakes can be made. Often introduce things into the picture, you know, like, oh, who could this be in your family? Or is this your brother? Is this a mean brother or is this a nice brother? Just to get those concepts going. The police car is one of the images we use quite a bit, and that's a really interesting one. I'll often put that in the picture or move it around and say, hey, you've got this police car here. Is that something safe or is that something quite scary? So we've done some research on it, which is great. So this is just the preliminary kind of results of our clinical trials. So we got children to score it out of 10. What did they think of the app on the cool or dumb scale? And so most kids scoring it quite high. We did get the odd 100 out of 10. So we did scale that back as per Dave Snowden's talk. We moved it in. Also, we asked the clinicians what did they think the child was getting out of it. And they all thought they enjoyed it as well, which was great. And did the clinicians feel this was better than the kind of usual stuff we have in the room to occupy the child, which was good. And this is probably the most important thing. Did clinicians have a clinical use out of this? Did they find this useful in their clinic encounter? And so pretty much every counter has been useful, which has been really great. We also got a bunch of qualitative stuff, and there's more work we're still doing on that. This was from the child section, not the clinician section, in case people are wondering. I'll let people read what one of the clinicians has wrote, and then I'll start this video. So these are just a few of my colleagues talking about their experience with the app. People may recognise them.
I used the app with a little 5-year-old girl who was quite difficult to engage with, as was her family, and found it quite a useful thing to divert her attention and to have us working on something together in a less sort of confrontational interrogation style.
The 9-year-old that I saw today immediately, without sort of asking, had sort of drawn things that were pertinent to her and her family life, which was really helpful.
I was actually playing on the app while I was talking too, so we were sort of doing things together, and it helped us engage things quite a lot.
I used this app with one of our 10-and-a-half-year-old girls. She was able to give me more information about, and also how she structured her home, and that was quite interesting information when she drew the pictures. And I think it's quite a good app to use.
So that's where we're up to. So I just wanted to talk about the current and future plans. So plan is to get this app to every DHB in New Zealand. I know about 80% of the clinicians who do this kind of work, so that's not a huge obstacle. There's been quite a lot of interest from other people in the disability sector, particularly from the stroke group, where there's quite a compelling case to have some innovation in the patient communication area. Also from those working with youth justice, where young offenders' communication is becoming an increased focus. How do we make that better? We do some analytics. Now this is probably going to be sacrilegious, but we don't save any patient data. I know this is a health informatics conference, but I'm quite strong on the confidentiality aspects to this kind of work. What we do get is user data. So this is not identified to a patient or anything. But what we can see is using this Google Analytics things, which images are being used most, which functionality features they use most, like which sizes they like the images at, which sizes they don't like the images at. And so using this, the plan is that we can keep moving the app along so that each use actually reflects a child's use and less kind of driven by me. I hope in time this will kind of reflect what we see in society. I worked at Starship for a while after the second lot of Christchurch earthquakes. And there was a lot of trauma imagery we come to see in the children and how they interact. And similarly around the Rugby World Cup, I saw a lot of kids drawing more sort of macho, sort of All Blacks and things like that, which is all good. I'm not sure what's on the kind of topic at the moment, maybe nuclear missiles or American presidents, I'm not sure. But I hope that in time this will just kind of be a moving thing, that we can use this dashboard even to try a few things and say, well, that didn't work, they didn't like that. Move on. In the future, so this is looking way over the horizon, I'm waiting for the eye tracking kind of software to kind of get better. So once we get the platform out there, we can start thinking about doing some more diagnostically specific tasks. Particularly, we've got a difficult to diagnose group, and they're often comorbid autism, so ASD, intellectual disability, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So those kind of things, I think we might get some really interesting information. So thanks for hearing me today about the iTui app. Just go back. Oh. Can I just put that last video on? So it's been really good at this conference hearing about, there's been a lot of focus, even though it's kind of a tech conference, on patient stories, and I think that's a really valuable and rich area, so I definitely concur with that in my experience. Also, if anyone's got a few $1,000s to spare on app build and maintenance, that would be wonderful too, but really happy to connect with people, particularly in the patient communication space.